Good afternoon. My name is Robert Sellers. Thank you for joining us today as we commemorate the 1 year anniversary of the murder of George Floyd. And as we recognize and mark this anniversary, we also mark this occasion recognizing that it is not the one, it is not the only. We also recognize Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Tamir Rice, Sandra Bland, and so many others, so too many others who have unnecessarily, unjustly lost their lives as a function of either police violence or other forms of systemic racism and oppression. We come here in solemn solidarity to do all that we can do as individuals and as a larger collective to not only mourn their passing, to not only feel their loss, but also to dedicate ourselves to work to do everything that we can to make sure that they are the last that we lose in this manner. Some would ask, why are we doing this? Some would ask, why are we commemorating George Floyd's death? Rightfully so. They will note he's not the first to die in this manner. And unfortunately, I fear he won't be the last unless we do something about it. There are those who would say, if you look at his life, is his life a life worth celebrating? I know that there are those who would have issues with some of the things that were used in the defense to denigrate not only him, but to justify what happened to him. And those who heard that may again question, why are we commemorating George Floyd and George Floyd's life? To those who would ask that question, who have asked that question, I just simply say, I do not know George Floyd's life. I did not know George Floyd. I assume he's like all of us, all humans, flawed in some ways, but have great strength and divine nobility in other ways, and that his life is the most sacred thing on the earth. But I would have to admit, I do not know how George Floyd lived. But what I do know is how George Floyd died. And that's the reason we are here today, commemorating the 1 year anniversary of his death. We're here commemorating a long history of systemic oppression in this country, targeting Black bodies, resulting in the loss of Black lives. And in the understanding that Black lives matter in the way that all lives matter, it is incredibly important for us to commemorate this moment. Because this moment is as much about us and what we do moving forward as it is a referendum on the value of George Floyd's life. So as we put this brief program together today, I would ask that you would think about how you felt when you saw the video of George Floyd's last moments on earth. As we commemorate today, I'd ask you to think about the scores and scores of other lives that have come out in the last few years that have been cut short in similar manners, simply because of the color of the individual skins. Now, I'd like to move us along in today's program. Next will be Tiffany Ng, who is an assistant professor in our School of Music, Theater, and Dance and our university's carillonist. And she'll be playing on the carillon the song, Soon I'll Be Done. I want you, as you listen to this song, pay close attention to the fourth verse, which says, I want to see my mother going home to live with God. This is particularly relevant and ironic given Floyd's last words, where he called out in anguish, Mama, Mama, I'm through. Professor Ng.
Good afternoon. My name is Denne Lawton, and I am the Children on Campus Program Coordinator. A year ago in May, I was recovering from the coronavirus and had just been released from the hospital. I wrote a book entitled, I Am Sorry for Your Loss, Memoirs of a COVID Survivor. In that book, I talk about how I first learned and became aware of what was occurring relative to George Floyd, and I would like to read it to you. When mother stopped breathing. While I was in the hospital, I didn't really have a lot of time for social media. In fact, I am not sure if I even had Wi-Fi access during my hospital stay. It appears that a flood of posts started to come in on my timeline and in my newsfeed all at once when I arrived home. A lot had happened since I was hospitalized and returned home. I was a little reluctant to scroll through my posts, but did find my way to my page. There were so many of my friends and friends of my friends who sent their well wishes to me while I was sick. It made me feel good to see the outpouring of concern. I didn't feel like I was going through COVID alone. I felt a human connection through social media. I needed to feel connected because when I was in the hospital, I felt so isolated. I was glad to see that I didn't see many I am sorry for your loss posts. There had been no deaths among my friends and family and those who I was connected with on Facebook in weeks. This was great news. For a brief moment, it gave me hope that maybe the pandemic would be over soon. Maybe the deaths would stop. Maybe the sorrow would stop. Maybe I wouldn't have to see any more rest in peace or rest in heaven posts. Was it over? As I kept scrolling, I came across a post by a martial artist who is a mutual friend of my husband and I. It was of an officer with his knee on the neck of a man. The caption read, Black man killed on camera by officer. I couldn't watch the post. There was a part of me that was hoping that this was a hoax, because how could something like this happen in the middle of a pandemic? I immediately closed the Facebook app. I did not want to read or hear anything about this any further. About 2 hours later, I turned on the news to discover that it was true. There was a disclaimer before the video was aired, which stated, the image you are about to see is graphic. There it was. It was a police officer with his knee on the neck of an unarmed Black man. As I watched this video, I was still hopeful that this was going to end with the officer standing up and this being some sort of officer misconduct case. However, it wasn't. The officer kept his knee on the neck of this man until he died. And I just watched this on TV, and it was real. I later learned that the name of the man was George Floyd. I was in disbelief. What happened? We are Americans, and we are in the middle of one of the worst pandemics to hit our nation. What happened to the America that puts our differences aside and come together through a crisis like we did during 9/11? There is no time for racial injustice. To me, there was no room for racial injustice or anything like this. We were all supposed to be standing together to fight a common enemy, and that enemy was COVID-19. Is this the world that I fought so hard to be a part of again? Is this the world that I wanted so much to get back to? Is our country so divided that we actually have the time to overlook a threat that will continue to claim lives regardless of age, race, gender, or sexual orientation? Did COVID not teach us that we are all human and that anyone can die from this disease? Did I just witness a grown man cry out for his mother as he took his last breath? What happened while I was in the hospital? I was in sheer disbelief. The whole ordeal sent me into a deep, dark depression that I hadn't felt in a long time. There was a cloud of confusion, fear, concern, and dismay that I could not simply shake off. I was grieving because I felt hopeless. If we weren't willing to put our differences aside and work together, what would happen to us? I had to face the reality that America still had a disease that we had not yet come up with a vaccination for, and that was racism. Thank you.
This is what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like. what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like.
you.